Hey everybody, and welcome to This Week in Hell. A bit later this week than usual because I've had a bunch of things to work on, but I finally had some time to get one out. I didn't want to skip 2 weeks at once. First up this week is a Costco related story. Hang on. Things are not behaving. Okay. Costco workers are possibly going on strike. The vote passed on Sunday with a majority in favour of going ahead with the strike. I think this is nationwide in the US. The ABC article linked in the description that I looked at, where I learned about this, it showed a store in England to illustrate the story, so I don't know what's going on there, but it does seem to be nationwide in the US. It's all the usual stuff, you might imagine. Insufficient wages and employee benefits being the two biggest factors leading to the vote. Obviously, no one actually wants a strike here. Workers would like to be able to keep their jobs as normal, but until their bosses are willing to meet them somewhere in the middle when it comes to negotiations, then this is the choice that they have been left with. Hopefully, over time, the higher-ups will come to their senses and get around the negotiating table with a better offer than they've given before, and they'll be able to avoid the strike, which is ultimately what everyone wants. Because as we know, from recent strikes last year, the workers are the first to suffer when it comes to prolonged strikes. But they're also the ones that have very little choice if they want to improve their lot. Okay, that was a nice, gentle-ish story to ease you into the next batch that we can't really avoid looking at. I mean, I could, but there'd be a big hole where I haven't covered it. So it's time to talk about the elephant in the White House. On January 20th, Donald Trump was sworn in as the 47th President of the United States. A far less exciting event, a less exciting return than when David Tennant became the 14th Doctor. Right before he left the White House for the last time, President Joe Biden issued last-minute pardons to a number of individuals, many of whom were given pardons of a preemptive nature. Some went to his family, others to key figures who would be targets of supposed retribution for perceived slights from the Trump administration in the coming years. Now, not all these people were eager to receive these pardons, but this isn't a time for an ego or dick swinging. I think President Biden did the right thing here for all involved. Also worth noting, one of the pardons was the commutation of a sentence of Leonard Peltier. I'll apologize right now if that's not correct. I've looked up 5 different videos. I found, honestly, 5 different pronunciations. I was saying Peltier until I even looked it up. So, Peltier has been fighting against Native American discrimination since the 1960s, and he was among those involved in the occupation of Wounded Knee in 1974. It would, however, be for acts allegedly committed in 1975 that he would be arrested and convicted. The story goes that 2 FBI agents pulled over a vehicle containing Peltier and other men. The 3 men got out, and in the resulting firefight, the 2 agents were killed. Peltier has claimed his innocence. It is said that when he was later arrested, they found a handgun belonging to one of the agents in his RV. Those are just the broad strokes. There has been a lot of suggestion that he was set up. I believe he's always maintained his innocence. From the brief digging around I've done on this story, there definitely does seem to be some evidence that it could lean in that direction. Although I'm sure if you spoke to other people, they would say it leans heavily in the other direction. But the long and the short of it is, President Biden commuted his sentence from life in prison to home confinement for the rest of his days. Peltier is now 80, and he wasn't due for another full parole hearing until 2039. So I think, as an act of compassion, this is the sensible choice. Next up, not one to be outdone, as soon as he entered office, Trump began pardoning his own creatures. Roughly 1,500 went to the January 6th insurrectionists, One of whom was that fool with the horns that was whining that he didn't get his special diet while he was in prison. He touted that he was now going to go buy some guns. Way to show us that you're stable, dude. Way to show us. Yeah. However, perhaps the most significant of those pardons was the founder of the Silk Road, which is was a drug trafficking website from 2011 to 2013, Ross Ulbricht. He had been in prison since 2015. Now, as I mentioned, the Silk Road was a drug trafficking website. It ran in the deep web or dark web, whichever edgy term you want to use for it, whatever floats your boat, and was only accessible through a Tor browser. It wasn't as if they were just selling medication to make it easier for people to get it, perhaps at more reasonable prices. They were facilitating the sale of very illegal substances. I did look at the Silk Road once. I went on a few years back, downloaded the Tor browser, had to look around the deep web. My God, it was boring. So I then uninstalled the Tor browser and moved on with my life. There does seem to be a distinct difference in the motivation and the types of people that both presidents have chosen to pardon. And in his first days in office, Trump continues to do nothing surprising. He has been pumping out executive order after executive order. I'll just give you a sampling of those because he's still at it. He withdrew from the Paris Energy Agreement, pulled out of the World Health Organization, declared an energy emergency while also scaling back green energy initiatives. That covers a few different things. Delayed the TikTok ban in order to facilitate a proposed co-ownership deal, and has suggested that he'd be fine with his boy Musk being one of the individuals who might potentially own it. And it goes on and on and on. And that's only in the first couple of days. 4 more years of this, it's going to be awful, but it's certainly going to be entertaining, at least for those of us not directly in his wake. I just feel bad for the people who are stuck dealing with this right now. I don't, however, feel bad for the people who voted for him and are very soon about to regret what they did. You made your bed, you can lie in it. But that's enough of that for now. Mustn't grumble, mustn't grumble. We're going to move on to In Memoriam. A couple of big ones this week. Both are big if you're in the UK. Maybe one of them's only big if you're in the US. And first up, we say goodbye to David Lynch. A prolific filmmaker, TV maker, did a number of music videos, best known for his work on the show Twin Peaks. That still confounds many audiences to this day, trying to work out what really happened, the mystery of it all. He only actually made 10 films over his career, which was surprising, but almost all of them are names that you will recognize. David was among the many people evacuated as a result of the recent wildfires. I don't know if that had a direct impact on his health or what his condition was before that, but what I do know is that he passed away at his daughter's home on January 15th, and he was 78 years old. And lastly, we say goodbye to British comedian and actor Tony Slattery. Now, if you remember, I think it was the last video in this series, I spoke about the Cambridge Footlights and all the famous names that seem to come from that long-standing group. I can't remember if I mentioned Tony, but Tony went to Cambridge. He was good friends with Stephen Fry, and Fry suggested he join the Footlights, which he did, and he was a part of the group at the time when they won the Perrier Award for the review known as The Cellar Tapes, which you can actually still find on YouTube. I've seen a bit of it, it's quite funny. Unsurprisingly, a comedy troupe, which is quite funny. Now, I'm not sure if that gag of the name works in the US, but if they were American, I'd imagine it might have been called The Scotch Tapes or something like that, which would probably have still worked. Now, soon after The Cellar Tapes, Tony would go on to become the president of the Footlights. And while he would go on to appear in many wonderful projects over the years, film and television, he even, although he did not ultimately get the part, you can actually find footage out there of him auditioning to play the Doctor in the mid-90s during the attempted revival where they ultimately cast Paul McGann. I'm suddenly pausing for a sec to remember, is it Paul McGann? Because I mixed the McGann brothers up. But yeah, it was Paul McGann. Peter's Friends, of course, is a favourite film of mine. I own a copy of it. Genuinely, it's one of my comfort watches. And he would then go on to become a regular for a few years, for the first few years, on Whose Line Is It Anyway? And perhaps for a lot of people, that's what he's best known for. It is a tragic fact that throughout his life, Tony would suffer from substance abuse problems and mental illness, as they can often go hand in hand, as if people are trying to self-medicate. He would eventually kick the drug habit in the early 2000s, but it would take a lot longer for him to stop drinking. He did eventually. He did manage to. As I was typing this up last night before I sent it to be recorded, I was watching a talk, a sit-down chat he was giving at Cambridge to the students, and he was on good form, but this was about 5 years ago, I think it was, and it was about the time I believe he stopped drinking, but you could tell he was drunk while doing this. It was quite upsetting watching him. I always enjoyed his work. I wouldn't say I was a huge fan, but I always have enjoyed his work. He's one of those people that he's just been there so often, at least during my younger years. He was kind of the fabric of the entertainment industry in the country, like Fry and Laurie and all those people. Comparing the vibrant, handsome figure that he was in the 1990s to the man we saw in later years can be quite shocking, distressing to those who had lost track of him. Some might say the same about me, and I don't have any excuses. It is obvious he was struggling from the lingering effects of his addiction while still trying to kick the alcohol. But as I say, even with that, he was quick-witted, worked the audience very well, making jokes, sometimes making jokes very fast. I don't think the audience quite picked up on them right away. Still a seasoned professional, and knocking out the funny in a way only a seasoned professional can. Tony is survived by his partner of 39 years, Mark. And Tony passed away on January 14th, 2 days after suffering a heart attack. He was 65 years old. And that brings us to the end of This Week in Hell. I hope you're all settling into 2025. I hope you're still remembering that we're in 2025 and you're not trying to fill out 2024 when you're putting dates on things. We all do that. It's happened once so far to me. I had to pause for a second. Wait, what year is it? 2025. My heavens, it's like we're in the future. No major events going on with me. I'm just working away, taking in little gigs as they come to me, and trying to keep my promise to myself of being a bit healthier, gradually cutting back on eating the rubbish, making sure I'm doing a little bit on the treadmill each day as I kind of build up on that, and I'm actually quite enjoying it. Glad I got the one with a bar on it though, because I've been a bit wobbly a few times, and if I hadn't had that I would have fallen. But for now, I'll hopefully see you next week, if not the week after, depending on what work I have on. So until next time, thank you very much for watching, and take very good care of yourselves.